I've always been a big fan of cooking. There's something therapeutic about chopping vegetables, stirring a pot, or kneading dough. Growing up, my mom taught me how to cook, and it became more than just a life skill. Cooking was a bonding experience, a way to express love, and a method of relaxation. I carried that love for cooking into adulthood, and when I began dating, it became one of the subtle ways I judged the compatibility of a potential partner. It didn't take long to notice a pattern. Most of the men I dated had kitchens that were barely functional. They had the bare minimum, a fridge, a stove, maybe a microwave, but that was where their culinary enthusiasm stopped. The cabinets were nearly empty except for a few mismatched plates, and the spice rack? Non-existent. If they had spices at all, it was usually a forgotten shaker of salt or pepper gathering dust in the back of a cupboard. Their knives were dull, their pots scratched and dented, and their kitchens felt more like food storage spaces than places where meals were lovingly prepared. At first, I thought I could overlook it. After all, I told myself, not everyone needs to be passionate about cooking the way I am. Maybe it was just a difference in priorities, and I could introduce them to the joys of cooking. But after a while, it became clear to me that a man's kitchen was a reflection of something more than just his eating habits. It was a reflection of how he approached life. I remember one guy I dated who lived in a sleek, modern apartment. Everything about the place was immaculate, the minimalist decor, the pristine floors, the spotless countertops. But when I opened the kitchen cabinets, they were shockingly barren. There was one pot, one frying pan, and a set of utensils that looked like they came from a dollar store. There were no spices, no cutting boards, no baking sheets, nothing that suggested any kind of cooking had ever taken place there. His fridge told the same story, a 6-pack of beer, a few takeout containers, and some condiments that were probably years past their expiration date. The kitchen, though beautiful and modern, was more of a showpiece than a functional space. It didn't take long for me to realize that he didn't see food as something to savor or appreciate. For him, it was just fuel, something to get through the day without much thought. That's when I began to truly understand that a kitchen reveals more than just culinary habits. It's a window into how someone lives their life. If a man didn't have the tools to cook, it meant he probably didn't value the time or effort it took to prepare a meal. It suggested a lack of care, not just for food, but for other aspects of life that required nurturing, patience, and attention to detail. I didn't expect every man I dated to be a gourmet chef, but I started paying more attention to the state of their kitchens. It became a litmus test of sorts. A well-stocked kitchen, one with sharp knives, decent cookware, and a variety of spices, told me a lot about a man's level of independence, his ability to take care of himself, and his appreciation for the process of creating something from scratch. Then there was the guy with the kitchen that blew me away. From the moment I stepped into his apartment, I could tell something was different. The living space was cozy and inviting, with bookshelves lining the walls and a few plants adding life to the room. But it was the kitchen that truly captivated me. As I opened the cabinets, I found a treasure trove of cookware. There were stainless steel pots and pans, an array of sharp knives neatly arranged on a magnetic strip, and a spice rack that could rival any gourmet chef's. He had cutting boards in multiple sizes, mixing bowls, and even a mortar and pestle, which made me grin with delight. His fridge wasn't just a place for leftover takeout containers. It was stocked with fresh produce, colorful vegetables, herbs, cheeses, and neatly organized condiments. There was a carton of fresh eggs, a container of homemade soup, and even a batch of dough rising in a bowl, covered with a damp towel. This kitchen belonged to someone who didn't just cook out of necessity, he cooked because he enjoyed it. I asked him about it, and he told me that cooking was a big part of his life. He'd grown up in a family where meals were an event, a time for everyone to come together, share stories, and connect. He carried that tradition into adulthood, using cooking as a way to relax after a long day and to express creativity. We spent many evenings cooking together. He'd hand me a knife, and we'd chop vegetables side by side, occasionally stealing bites of whatever we were preparing. There was something intimate about the experience, something that transcended the act of cooking itself. It was a shared rhythm, a collaboration that didn't require words. We worked together fluidly, stirring, tasting, seasoning, and adjusting the flavors as we went. By the time the meal was ready, we felt a sense of accomplishment, not just because of the food, but because of the connection we had built in the process. Those nights in the kitchen were some of the most memorable moments of that relationship. It wasn't just about the meals we made, it was about the time we spent together, creating something with our hands. There was a level of cooperation and trust that went beyond the food. We both took pride in what we were making, and that pride spilled over into other aspects of our relationship. Though that relationship eventually ended, it left me with a deeper understanding of what I wanted in a partner. Cooking had always been important to me, but it wasn't just about the act of preparing food. It was about the values behind it, the appreciation for the time and effort it took to create something, the willingness to engage in a process that required patience and attention to detail, the desire to share that experience with someone else. Not every man I dated after that had an impressive kitchen, but I began to view it as a green flag when I found one who did. A functional, well-stocked kitchen suggested a level of independence and self-sufficiency. It told me that he was capable of taking care of himself, that he valued good food and the effort it took to make it. It wasn't just about having the right tools, it was about the mindset behind those tools. One man I dated had a modest apartment, but his kitchen was thoughtfully arranged. He didn't have the fanciest cookware, but everything he did have was in good condition. His spices were organized, his knives sharp, and his fridge filled with fresh ingredients. There was a certain mindfulness to how he approached cooking. He didn't rush through it or treat it as a chore. He took his time, experimenting with flavors and savoring the process. In contrast, I once dated a man who seemed to have it all together. His apartment was gorgeous, his career successful, but his kitchen was a disaster. There were old, burnt pans piled in the sink, and his fridge was a graveyard of takeout containers and forgotten leftovers. It was clear that cooking wasn't something he valued, and it mirrored his approach to other aspects of his life. He was used to shortcuts, to convenience, to doing things the easy way. Looking back, I realized that a kitchen is more than just a space for cooking. It's a reflection of how someone lives their life. A man with a well-organized, functional kitchen shows that he's willing to put in the time and effort to create something meaningful. It shows that he's capable of taking care of himself, of nurturing not just his body, but his surroundings. And that's something I've come to value deeply. Now, when I visit a potential partner's home, I always take a peek into the kitchen. It's not about judgment, it's about understanding. A kitchen tells a story, not just about how someone eats, but about how they approach life. Whether it's filled with top-of-the-line cookware or simple, functional tools, what matters is the care and intention behind it. Because in the end, it's not just about cooking a meal, it's about the life you're building together, one dish at a time.